Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to another podcast on the Higher Order Systemic Energetic Awareness Forum YouTube channel, where I am continuing my little sequence on past lives, present lives, future lives, and how our past lives influence us in the now. For those of you who are new to this series, I recommend you listen to the two prior podcasts. But here in this one, I'm going to talk about karma, or the law of reciprocity. And the context is here. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my work, I am a licensed psychotherapist. I work as a clairvoyant, as a healer, combining that with my psychotherapist approach, which I'm schooled, formally educated within what we call existential psychotherapy. I got a bachelor degree in theology. Not that I'm religious in any ways or forms. I embarked on the university study at the Copenhagen University on theology because I wanted to study the ancient texts in their original language, learning ancient Hebrew, learning ancient Greek, and learning ancient Latin. And if you ask me, do I remember any of it today? Probably not, because I'm not using it, but it can quickly be brushed up if need be. But summa summarum, as we say it in Danish, because I live in Denmark, at the end of the day, it did not bear the fruit I had hoped for. Instead, I went through 3.5 years of scholastic exercises, which at the end of the day say what was the biggest takeaway from my university study and my achieving my bachelor degree, completing all exams and doing what I had to do to get my degree, was that I learned scientific mythology. And I think that's an important approach when we talk about topics that reaches beyond our everyday awareness, even just within general science and within general humanity. Learning to work in a via the scientific methods is a good approach. Not that I'm going to say that when we talk about past lives or psychotherapy or any other topics that relates to human psychology and human experience, it is difficult to validate it and make it evidence-based, because it is a level of perception, of inner perception. And yes, we can do biology and neuroscience, and we can delude ourselves to believe just because we have got machines that are measuring different brainwave patterns and electrochemical processes and looking at the body as a machine, then we kind of got what it means to be human. We got what the mind is. We got what our emotions are. We got what it means to be existing here and beyond. But one thing that constantly escapes the scientific ground, even within the religious study of the Bible, the new Gospels and the ancient Hebrew Bible is, and the church fathers and the old philosophical texts and all the things I went through, including my own private studies in Hinduism and Buddhism, and other levels of esoteric teaching systems, Dion Fortune, Alice A. Bailey, Blavatsky, some of the Keylontic sciences, not to the degree I wanted to, but what I could get my hands on without getting too involved into it. And that was back in the 2007. So that's a long time ago. I let that one go in 2012 when the whole system kind of collapsed. Other approaches, what I could get my hands on in the 90s and the 2000s on the internet, having had lectures on esoteric teaching systems within the theosophical community in Denmark, having been part of different expos, having had different lectures, having had private lectures, and have worked in Denmark as well with trying to create my own school at the time, calling the Interplanetary Academy, which I then had to let go of and then course correct and do something entirely else, ending up with a whole academy where I now teach my version of the progressive sciences, of the original approach to how to achieve expanded awareness, which has very little to do with any other teaching system or any other form of teaching system. because in my opinion, most of the teaching systems we have had so far are centered around the heart field, which is enormously important. My teachings go into that as well. But I go beyond what we could call the astral plane, and I go beyond what we could say the subconscious, and I go beyond because as a psychotherapist working with people, having my own practice, working with people over 10 years, including healing and what we could call theta states, because when I was healing people, I could get them into theta state, and there we work with past lives. So this is where I will approach, sorry about that, where I approach karma and past lives from my practice as a psychotherapist. The way I built it up was that we first started up having a normal psychotherapeutic conversation, childhood issue typically, or relationship issue, or work issue, or it was kind of a spectrum between psychotherapy, going into coaching, going into advice, good advices of how to live your life. And that's all summed up in the whole Living Blue Flower, the whole project Blue Flower, where I work with nutrition, I work with exercise, I work with education, what type of work we should have, going into the whole understanding of psychology, and ending up in what we call progression dynamics that leads us to an expanded awareness, because that's the full human. We have got many different levels. If we don't take care of our body, then it will deteriorate. So that's food and health and exercise. And plus, if you want to reach expanded awareness, you have to have a healthy body, healthy mind. You can't keep and hold the higher level types of energies if your body is full of energetic parasites, distortion energies, it is dysfunctional, it is not up to speed with what it needs to do, having different forms of ailments and onward and so forth, because the moment the higher order energies begin to descend and integrate into the physical form, it will deteriorate all of these energies, and that's a good thing. But if we're not on top of how to maintain the body and how to keep it healthy and how to give it the right nutrition and the right care, then these higher order energies in their activation and cleanup processes, instead of actually assisting us in, for instance, losing weight and getting a better health and get a better immune system and eat less and exercise more and wanting to live a more healthy lifestyle, being careful and mindful about what we put into our mouth of nutrition, stop drinking alcohol, stop smoking cigarettes, stop doing everything we kind of know, this creates distortion energy. So with the high order energies, if that's present in our body, then it will blast out into higher dimensions of negativity, literally, because what we are will be what we will see. And that's a very important understanding in the law of reciprocity, or on karma, because karma is both a Buddhist word, but also a Hindu word. And in Buddhist theology or ideas, and sorry for calling it a theology, but it has in a way become a theology, because modern Buddhism has a tendency to, I would say, incorporate things from Hinduism, but also from the teaching system that's called Kala Chakra, where we work with the deities. So I know that the ideas, the ones that the practitioner of what we coined Buddhism, but the practitioners of the philosophy of the path, they will resent that I call it that. It's not a religion. They will, if we are to ask them what they would call it, they call it a philosophy, a way of living, which is probably more accurate. And that's why I prefer to call them practitioners, because they are practitioners of the path of liberation, in the way I would put it. So again, the reason why I do it that way is because I have an actual memory of being a Buddhist monk in 1959, where I met my maker, so to speak, even though that practitioners do not believe in makers, but that's how we say it in the Western world, right? Anyway, so I will return to that. My idea is that I will make a podcast on that one alone, but I'm still debating whether or not it's a good idea. I refer to it other places in my take on Buddhism, where I kind of deconstruct the line of ideas within the Buddhist teaching systems are put there. It's on the whole Academy YouTube channel, where I have my take on Buddhism. Here on this one, I have my take on the chakra system. So in that manner, you could say some of the teaching systems that are founded and arose in the segment of our planet that we call India today, the land of the Rajas, are then covered in these two branches because the Hindu teachings began with the Brahims that came from Atlantis and went there, and they are the founders of the chakra teaching systems. It had specific purpose there. And then we had the later bunch of the lunars that were incorporated in to the Brahim lineages, and they are the founders technically of what we call Buddhism. So that's my take on it. And that's not what you find in history books. It's not what you find out there. But this is what I see when I look into the origin of it, look in my expanded awareness and follow the trail and some of the experience and visions I have had in my work with the path of liberation, these ideas. So when we understand a practitioner on the path of liberation, then we also begin to understand the difference between karma and dharma. And again, I suggest you look these up on Wikipedia or just look up any line of thought that goes with Dharma. Dharma is the path of life, the one we're born into. To make it short in modern day version, there are more implications of it. It's more detailed. It has deeper, profound meanings than the one I'm presenting here. But we could say, well, you're born into this life, and this life is your current Dharma. This is the life you have now. This is the life you live now. This is the life you live to the fullest extent of your abilities as another part of the path of liberation, seeing all lives, past lives, and this life as a long line of lives that should lead to liberation, that should lead to the complete releasement of being part of this reality, entering into what's called nirvana, the still point, the point of nothingness, the point of non-existence, the point of all existence, the point of what we don't know what is, because we have no words that can conceptualize what nirvana is. But it goes with this long line of lives that as we proceed from one life to another, the Hindus talk about that we are walking a ladder of different forms from low to high. And if we kind of mess up, then karma will kick in and push us back on the ladder of progression, which is called transgression, and give us the next life will then be on a lower level than the life we have now. If we succeed and if we do well in this life, we will be put into a higher position. That's the general idea. But when we talk about the practitioners of the path within the lunar scope of things, then it's not as much as to do the Dharma or live your life to achieve a higher position in the next life, which is a little bit selfish, right? Yeah, I do this life. I live this way. I follow the rules and the laws. I follow the gospel, so to speak, or I follow the gospel in Greek. It's Greek word, and actually just means the message of the happy testimonial message of, it's also kind of liberation. Not to say, oh yeah, then just to use that way, that Buddhism is the same as Christianity, because it's not. But there is this idea when you do look into Christianity, there is this idea, they don't operate with future lives and past lives. They only have this life because it's based upon, Jewish concepts of reality, and that's where you only have one life. You're born into this one. You must do the very best. But in the Jewish line of thought, you also have the Torah, which that's the Hebrew Bible that teaches. The Torah is also meant as the path. We also have in Chinese philosophy Tao. That's also a path. So life is a path. Right? We have different philosophical systems, different religious systems that tells us you were born into this life. And when we talk about the Torah, then, sorry about that, the Hebrew Bible, we walk the path of God. So we walk to come out of, we are born in sin, as St. Paul said. We are born in sin, but we are walking through our life following the amendment, the words of God, the inner, path that has been put in front of us that are littered with the brickstones of the different rules, the 10 commandments, the ways that you are following your lifespan. You do that in the path and the light of what you get from God in your prayer, in your daily practices, in your rituals. That's the religious approach in Judaism, all right? So, and there you then walk that life, and then at the end of the day, you will achieve what you will, that's technically Judgment Day, is not the big thing, doomsday kind of thing, but that's at the end of the day at the end of your life where you will meet your maker. That's judgment, right? Then you will be weighed, as it said in Egyptian understanding, where you meet Anubis, right? You go to the underworld or you're going up to the heavens, right? Will you cross the waters from this life and into the next life? That's Egyptian philosophy. Sorry for throwing all of this in, but when we talk about these concepts that comes from the older civilizations, they are very similar. They're not identical, but they're very similar. So we can't say, oh yeah, the underworld of Egypt is the same as the underworld in Judaism, or that the underworld of Mesopotamia, the Niburian, the Baals and the Niburians and Sumerians, because these are three different groups, are the same as the ones that we get presented in the different stages of the Egyptian kingdom. But there are this, if we do work with, sorry for deviating a little bit from karma dharma here, but we're working with the path of liberation in its different variations. Because what is liberation? Is it liberation in this life, or is it liberation in the next life, or is it the liberation of not returning to another life? So these are some of the concepts that are worked within the ancient religious systems, right? But we must also remember that when we talk about Egyptian transfer over the river between the living and the dead, then by the ferryman, which we also have a little bit of in old Nordic concepts of death, with putting the coins on their eyes and these things. Well, then we also understand, yes, but most of the ones that had the ability to continue their existence were, in my opinion, not everyday man and woman, even though it's portrayed like that in later movies and what have you. But the typical thing is that the only one that were allowed to proceed into the next lives were kings and priests, nobilities, and rich people, free people, people that had reached a kind of position inside society, because it was always put in that manner that the slaves in the low levels, they were like the critters, right? So they did not get a next life. So why did the commoners even practice these religions if they had no chance of getting a next life? But that was the mindset. Well, the rich and the nobilities, the kings and the priests, the ones that are in position, the elite, right? They had the rights to continue because they already had the position. So thereby, the gods must have favored them. Whereas I, as a low commoner, I'm a slave, so I must have done something really bad in my past life. It's a self-justification of, yeah, you got a shitty position within society, so thereby there must be a reason for it. So we kind of have a little bit of psychological understanding. Okay, so that's a little bit with the idea of karma, as in kind of you get a shitty position. Yeah, it's probably because I've done something really bad in a past life. And I recall having that when I began my spiritual journey and looked into my family setting. Not that it was horrible or anything. It was okay compared to others, but being a sensitive child, as I were, still am, and having this what we call old soul traits, there was a little bit of confusion for me as a kind of, why am I here? I'm not supposed to be here. What am I doing this for? I'm not supposed to be. This is off. Why I'm here in Denmark, of all places? Today I'm quite happy with it as the world looks today, but and now I kind of say, yeah, it's probably a good place to be born compared to being born in England or America. I've got past life there as well, or past lives in England, or a past life in Japan, and different places I have been born, or at least this body have been recirculated into different variations and different forms. So with that understanding, it's kind of, when I say body, I mean the blueprint of it, the holographic blueprint, the biofield, the emotional field, the mental field in different variations as it gets sealed off and put into different bodies. So here I'm always saying, okay, blasting the religious system, saying, yeah, there's different advanced technology involved in being reborn. But the concepts again with this, that when we begin our journey, we have this, why me here this life, and this confusion. So I think that's a good place to begin. And that's the traits that we see, because if you ask me, what are the foundation of religion? Religion is to try and find meaning in something that is seemingly meaningless. So the human brain wants to do that all the time. It wants to create explanations. It wants to find answers. It wants to connect the dots as in kind of what's going on here. And the lesser operational, that's a nice way to put it, the brain is, the lesser information that's stored in the neural networks, the simpler the explanations, the more complex information systems they can work with, the more it will look into all sorts of different angles on what's going on, as me having studied all sorts of different types types of religions and looked into different types of scriptures and looking here and there and everywhere to find the answers, which is based upon a dream I had when I was 13, where I had this older wise man that came and told me that in my dream that I had to look high and low in every places to find the answers I would seek, and what I would find would have no word, would have no explanation, would not be explainable, but I would know what it was, although it did not have any words or any sounds or any light or anything that I could conceptualize. So this is the understanding of the path. The path is wordless. So the practitioners of whether it's the Torah or the Tao in the Chinese version of it, Chinese philosophy, or we're talking about Dharma within Hinduism and the practitioners of the path of liberation, or we talk about whatever we talk about, we are on this path of life. So let us begin there and say, okay, we can all in today, we can with our psychological knowledge and our everyday life experience agree on, if we set a group of people down from all levels, all positions in life and say, how do you perceive life? And most will say, well, I just take one day at a time. So yeah, that's the mindfulness, just be in the now every day, which is a good approach. Others are worried about the future. Others are stuck in the past. Others are kind of clinging on to their comfort zone of who and what they think they are. They are clinging on to the ideas of I am this, I am that. This defines me. I'm my work. I'm a wife. I'm a husband. I'm a boyfriend. I'm a girlfriend. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a father. I'm a son. All of these labels that we put onto ourselves. I am beautiful. I'm ugly. I do this. I do that. All of these I. So that's kind of where the practitioners, they go first in and deconstruct all of that and say, okay, the identification, the self-identification, let's get rid of that one and see, okay, what are we talking about here? So why do I want to make that distinction between life as a path and then the concepts of self? Because that defines how we perceive the path of life. So if we have that's psychology as well. It's kind of called cognitive schematics. We have defined for ourselves how we want to perceive ourselves. So in the practitioner approach, that's the sense of I that we should deconstruct, so we do not identify ourselves with these different labels, constructs of what I am, right? So those of you who have been following that one, you also know that alludes to other types of teaching systems. But the whole idea of I as the most important thing is not the approach on the path. Actually, the most important thing on the path of liberation or the path of life or the path of existence is to the path. That's why Dharma, the path itself, in my opinion, others will say otherwise. These are again up to interpretation. But my interpretation of that one is that it's life itself that actually is the most important. And that's where people who have had a near-death experience and come back, they suddenly shift from all of these achievements that are connected to the I, shift into the achievements of doing good for others, doing good for life, having a purposeful, meaningful life. So that's why we shift approach and say it's not about achieving that satisfies the I, because the I am will eventually discover that all of this is feigned. It's permeable. It's flexible. It's changeable. Then we think, if I only achieve this, then I'll be happy. If only I do that, then I will achieve my goal. If only this, then, if, then. And that's the whole concept of I. And then if we reach what we have put in front and we don't get satisfied, then we get disgruntled, we get sad, and we get frustrated. And I thought this was it, and now it's not, and now I'm in it. I'm completely entangled in it. How do I get out of it? So this is also where we say eyes open, people, eyes open, because life is not about achieving goals of who and what I think is the right goal for me. Life is about living life. It is about mastery of life. It is about learning how to deal with life as it is. And that's where psychotherapy comes in. Because when we talk about living life as human beings, especially as my many years of practice as a psychotherapist, and then, as I said, we began talking about normal stuff as in life. And then once we had went through that, I would put them on the table and I would heal them. And then past lives would come up that would reconnect. So sorry about that. That would reconnect with with some of the issues that people were actually dealing with, which they didn't understand. Why do I have that foundational idea, that schematic, that pattern of ideas of how to perceive certain situations? Let's just put it this way. And we're as a psychotherapist, we dig in and say, well, that's childhood trauma, for instance. We can go in and say, I'm so sorry about my voice and these things that are kind of surfacing. It's a bit of a problem I always have, because I normally live in silence, and then my whole system just kind of goes into a dormant state, especially when after sleep. Sleep is a bit of a dread for those of us who have an expanded awareness. And being pulled in and coming back leaves different types of residual energies in our system. And that's just how it is. So getting operational again, getting back into my body, then pushes all of that up to the surface, which is part of life as well. So this is just a transformational processes from being asleep, being somewhere else, and then coming back into the body, and then getting the body back up and running, which is easier when we're younger and gets absolutely more complicated as we get older. But that's another level of life as well. Okay, so point being is that putting people on the table, healing them, and then seeing their past lives, and then getting the understanding how it connects. Not that we're kind of saying, oh yes, your experience this is this life because you had that past life. But it goes with the whole residual idea. It goes with the whole idea of something that lingers on that we have not dealt with as part of life in a past life. So it lingers on as part of our emotional field. It becomes part of our belief system when not we are being, but when the biofield, emotional field, and mental field are put back into circulation. And I prefer to put it in that little bit mechanical, scientific way instead of saying, I am being reborn. It's better to say these three lower fields are being reused over and over again and put into different organic vessels within different countries under different types of programs that are not in many ways and forms always made for the highest good of us, but are made for the purpose of other races and civilizations that are part of our system that we right now are existing within what I call the enclosure or the Truman Show. So my foundational understanding of why we are still in circulation, it differs tremendously from most concepts that people have out there. And that's been part of my search, because going into this whole, again, I know I'm going in and out of the topic, and you say, can't you just stay focused on the whole? I want to know about the past lives and the current lives, and I want to know about karma. So could you please just tell me about karma? Okay, I'll tell you about karma, please. Okay, let's just focus on that one. But you see, when we work with complex concepts that are tied to energy, it's not just you have A and then you have B. It's not just that simple. Karma is this, because it's not. The karma is not just about the reciprocity or the payment of your past life. So if you have done something stupid in your past life, well, then you will have a shitty life in this one. Or if you have done good in your past life, then you will have a good position inside this life. That is what I say. That's the human interpretation of a very ancient law, the law of reciprocity. And I want to get to the point, what is the law of reciprocity then? But to get there, you need to have context. And context is where I explain to you that we have had many different civilizations on our planet, which you know. But the most recent ones are the foundation of many religious systems, of New Age included. The current version of that life is a school that began with the Bailey material, actually. She's the one that also coined the New World Order, just so you kind of know it. But that group of the ascended masters began to coin the idea that life is a school and we're here to learn different lessons, contrary to the Hindu system that were under the gods and the rulership of the gods and the priesthoods, and people were put into different levels of the caste system of society where they had different functions under the rulership of the gods. So karma that way is under the rulership of the gods. So in that manner, you can say living your life as whatever position you had would be to appease the gods. Hence rituals, hence this going to the temple, hence these kind of things to get a better life, sacrifices, rituals, what have you, whether it's just putting out flowers on the street every morning, as some of the Hindu good believers do, or whether it's these big festivals or whatever it is. It's all about appeasing the gods so you get a better position in your next life. So that's from my perspective, very service to self-orientation, right? I'm doing this so I get a better position. It's not about doing this, because we actually want to fulfill our true purpose as a living, existing being. The practitioners of the path go more into this understanding. How can I, as a living being, not an I, but how, still is difficult language to kind of say, how can this body and this mind and this emotional field and this existence fulfill its purpose as part of Dharma under the rulership of the path, not a deity, but the path itself, which not I, but what I am, not I. This is the difficulty. How do we do that language? These skandhas, these fields of energy, what they compose, what they produce, what they put in motion. That's the Dharma. Whatever this is, puts into motion certain events. It puts in motion certain circumstances. It put in motion certain experiences that will then, via the practice of mindfulness, be observed and worked with in a manner that leads to what we could say enlightenment, that leads to the understanding of when this energy is in use, then reality will mirror back to me certain circumstances, certain experiences, certain kinds of distortion, certain types of maya or glamour that will show what is in my fields, what this body contains of energy, of thought processes, of ideas, of concepts, of constructs, of belief systems, of interpretations, of knowledge, of mind processes, of emotional processes. We can always discuss how much the Buddha, the teacher of, or the one that conveyed the sayings of the path, very complex way of saying it, but it is important because words have a huge role. If you say teachings, then he becomes a teacher. And in my opinion, the first practitioner of the path, which was founded on some ancient sayings that he got access to, not studied it at some kind of temple. He got access to it via his practice in meditation. And that's some of the visions I've had as well, where he meets these ancient, very, very ancient lunars that then hands over this information in different forms of visions, where you are gathered in these weird circle councils where you meet these very ancient entities. Because what are they? When I look at them, I say, yeah, they are the remaining hollow shells of ancient civilizations that used to inhabit our reality field. And these are the lunars that came here with the moon. So they are technically aliens, right? So that would be kind of, yeah, that's not what we know, right? When we talk about practitioners of the path. But that's the foundation of it. And then there are later things that comes in with the White Syrian Elder Strands. When I have been working with my past life as a Buddhist monk, then the White Syrians came in, the Elder Strand, that were before the timeline event. And they have come in and they have kind of taken over, but they are technically part of the Aryan Shivas that were part of the Hindu fifth root race, or sub-race of the fifth root race. So how does that add in with the first practitioner of the sayings of the path? How does that add in with the lunar ideas that came there? So there are these, when we work with visions and we work with experiences in meditation, and when we enter into the realms of knowledge that are tied to our reality field, then there are these brackets. There are literally brackets, as in kind of these little pieces of information that doesn't add up to the bigger picture, so to speak. It's not as you go in, then you get the full thing rolled out. You begin a pattern of understanding. And that's why it's important to say it's not a teaching, because a teaching is something that's already done. It's a pattern that has been completed, such as my progression sciences. That's a teaching system now, because it has its thought forms, it has its mythology, it has its the way you practice it, it has its exercises, it has its integration process. And it redefines defines you. So that's a teaching system. But when we talk about the sayings, they are loose sayings that are going back to ancient civilizations that have been handed over, a little bit similar when the scholars of theology and Christianity, they look into saying, well, we can scrape away the whole biography about the character Jesus. We can scrape away all the historical quote unquote facts because that we know that's made up. It's kind of a story. The gospel's a story that's been tailored for these sayings. So there again, you have this concept and these ideas that we have had prominent features or prominent people with prominent features that have existed, and they have talked about certain things. That's why I want to say it's a saying, because it's not necessarily a teaching. And the reason why I want to go there is because when I look into what I can find of information about the first practitioner of the path in its more modern form, as it was reseeded and reconnected to 500 BC via the person that we know as the Buddha, then I would say, well, the way I see how he was teaching his new practitioners that were commoners, first and foremost, very important. So they were not nobility. We have that in Christianity as well. We have Jesus that comes out and teaches the commoners and not the rabbis. He does attempt to do that, not the nobility. He was actually being haunted by the nobility, so to speak, right? The story about King Herodes that tried to track him down when he was born. So we have this understanding. We suddenly have people that go into the commoners, that go into the slaves, that defies the elite, that goes against the ones in power, and try to teach these commoners that they have a right for liberation. They have this right to achieve what we call higher awareness. It's not just for the elite. It's not just for the ones in power. It's not just the ones that have positioned themselves. On the contrary, these who have positioned themselves, we play with these ideas as well today. The ones that have positioned themselves, have they made certain agreements with the Faustian deal, right? Have they sold their soul to blah, blah, blah? Or are they actually practicing some kind of ritual that goes into give them power, that goes into this and that? We have that again surfacing in our everyday, when the whole conspiracy theories that have been put into motion in the last 20, 30 years, it's all founded around that. And then I would say, yeah, let's get rid of all these religious entities and what have you. There are definitely hollow shells from different levels of a reality field. But let us go in and say, yeah, perhaps we're actually linking up to something else, as I have seen when I've looked into, for instance, some of the Inca priests, or I've looked into some of the Egyptian priests, or the Mesopotamian priests. Every time I look into some of these timelines where we have the priesthood, they're always in contact with some kind of telepathic alien communication. So that's why we can just say, okay, if we play with that concept, then we can literally just make clean slate on all forms of religions, because it's not deities, it's visitors. Okay, these are incoming groups from other planetary systems, let's call it that, other systems, other reality fields, other levels of existence, not gods, but they appear so for the simple mind. So we got that one in check. So that's kind of okay. If we kind of have the Hindu system that is based upon the deities, the Aryan Shivas, which I've actually seen it in one of my pull-ins, where on one of the in 2017. I'm not going to go further into that one, but I saw the Aryan Shivas, that they are not deities. They are actual extraterrestrials. So with blue skin and a white skin. So that go into that understanding. I mentioned them in my book, The Source of Humanity. So with that understanding, plus suddenly things go into a different type of conceptualization, where we then begin to say, okay, if we have the idea of karma and dharma as not in the original Hindu version linked to the gods, and that commoners were not allowed on the path, commoners were just commoners and would always remain commoners until they wore out, and that would how it would be, and that would be the place in life. So the practices of the expanded awareness, so to speak, were either via priesthoods that then had connection to what we call a telepathic connection to otherworldly beings. And then you had the kings that were administering the reality field, as it were, with their queens that would be there as a breeder and nothing else. Then you have a different construction. Then we don't romanticize the whole idea of past life that much, but actually put it into its context where it was grown as a system of suppression instead of a school, right? So this is where things are flipped upside down in New Age, where you try to romanticize something that's not to be romanticized at all. This is based upon some pretty harsh conditions for humans that are trying to find a way. Why is that person that is there dressing himself or herself in all sorts of garments and all sorts of fancy clothes with silver and gold and what have you, why are they more important than I, that are working my ass out, that are hungry, that are starving, that are under different types of ailments? What have I done to deserve that? Why are the gods so harsh on me? Why is my life this when their life is that? Because seemingly they have a head and 2 arms and 2 legs. They have penises and vaginas as me. They poop as me. But then there's the whole brainwashing that's been going on that these nobilities, the elite, whatever, they're special. They are ruling the country, and the commoners should be grateful that they are there. That's part of the whole, the priesthoods were tailoring these stories for the commoners so that when the commoners went to the priest and said, what is this about? Why do I have this miserable life? The answer would be 2 things. Either it's because you have upset the gods, or because you're not doing what you're supposed to appease the king and what the king wants you to do as part of his jurisdiction, as part of his realm, because you should be grateful that you even have a life. We could kill you if you don't do as we're saying. So that's the understanding. Okay, then how do you live under that oppression? You create thought forms. You have what's called cognitive dissonance. So you create thought forms that gives you the grounds for why you can continue existing, even though it's a miserable life you have got. But you create conditions, you create kind of existential belief systems that grants you the understanding of, why am I in this miserable life? It's because of this. It's because of that. And if you don't have the high education, if you don't know how to seek information, as it were back in the days of the ancient civilizations that had high cultures, but only for the rich and the elite and the nobilities, not for the commoners because they were slaves, then you understand that the path of liberation, as we see it in Christianity, as St. Paul talks about, that you are freed from your slavedom as part of society once you become part of Corpus Christi, that is the body of Christ, which is the risen Christ, not the physical Christ, but the risen Christ, which then becomes a huge energy field from where you do certain rituals, which are then being replicated into the church, that you're there, this is my body, this is my blood, you are taking part of my pain, you are taking part of my sacrifice, and by that you get access to the kingdom of heaven, right? So that's the death cult in Christianity. You have to die to rise up. You have to be crucified to rise up. You have to go through pain and suffering to rise up. So that's the death cult of Christianity. So that's a different approach that, which is also why, if you ask me, could I ever become a priest in a Christian church, even though I technically have the education for it, I put a couple of more years on it, I could become a priest. And the answer is absolutely no. I cannot go in and tell people that whatever they are having of issues in life is because of God, that has this large project of redeeming people through different forms of sacrifices and different forms of ailments and different forms of political systems that are using that as suppression and worshiping the whole death cult. Yes, you have to worship that corpse on the cross in the church that are through torture and torment. And I already realized that as a child, and you go into the church and see this poor guy hanging there, you're saying, what is that about? How can I worship a God that sacrificed his first son? How can I do that? That's not loving. That's not kind. That's not this whole sacrifice idea. So that's archaic. That goes back with the practices of the temple cult that always sacrificed another life so someone could get elevated. That's archaic thinking. You kill something to get better life. You sacrifice something so you can rise up to a high position. That's wrongful use of energy. That's wrongful use of consciousness, and it is exploitation of other life forms to elevate yourself into a high position. So that's ritualistic, and that goes very closely to other stuff that those of you who have eyes to hear with, right? Eyes to see with and ears to hear with, you will say, yeah, I kind of see where that one comes from. And then you look at Christianity one more time and say, perhaps it's not what it's been told. Perhaps it's actually something completely else. And that's my take on that one. That's why, even though I studied it, it has been a good foundation for me to say, okay, where does the thought form actually come from? And what were they founded in? And what were your original ideas that were flourishing at the time of Christianity? What was the culture? What was the concepts? How was it in ancient Egypt? How was it in Mesopotamia? How was it in Judea? How was it in all of these ancient cultures that were prominent at the time? What were their religious belief systems? And what are the similarities and where are they dissimilar? And one thing we could say for a certainty is that there was an elite, there was the nobility, what we call the rich people, so to speak. You had the king, you had the priesthood, you had the nobility that were working under the king. They were the ones that had land, they were the ones that had property, and then you had the slaves. And that was how that was built up. And we can ask ourselves today, is it so different today? Just put that in motion. So seeding that one in. But the idea and the concepts are, when we talk about, the reason why I'm putting this one is because when we talk about karma and when we talk about Dharma, it is important that we don't romanticize it. We need to put the concepts and the ideas into their right boxes. That's a scientific method where we say, okay, it was founded in an ancient culture. And you can say, well, Randy, you're interpreting how these people felt. Yes, I am completely interpreting how these people felt. But the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm kind of looking at the societies that we're trying to envision. You say, well, that's made up. That's not how it was. Well, when we project our consciousness and our perception field back in time, we are, of course, always interpreting from our level of understanding. And this is me proving a point as in kind of, it might be true, it might not be true. But it is an idea, it is a concept, it is a construct that perhaps leads to different thought processes that I have tailored for you to get out of the new age romanticized idea of past life as being a lesson, of past life being a school, of past life being something that you endure so that if you live correctly, then you will get a better next life. As in, if you learn the path of life, the Dharma, the way that you're exercising your life and the way you approach life, then you will get a better position in the next life, because foundationally, that is selfish. You're not living, so to speak. Sorry about that. You may not, the 10 Commandments, right? But the point is, we should make a shift of ideas, a shift of concepts here, a shift of belief systems. When we talk about karma and Dharma and life, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and what's the purpose of it in its correct historical context. And once we have that historical context, we can say, okay, that's interesting though. Okay. So if the whole idea of karma is founded in the concepts of trying to find meaning in life, and it has nothing to do with gods, because yeah, are you living in the Western world or in Africa or in Japan or whatever? Are you under the Hindu gods? Are you under the Aryan Shivas and that caste system and how they build it up? Or you're under the Baals or the Madukians or the Sumerians or the Anunnakis or whatever of the Mesopotamia, or under the Tothians or the Anubians or of the Horosians or the Isises Anyans or the Osirians, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, right? Are you under these belief systems? Are you under these quote unquote hollow shells remaining programs that were tailored for the ancient civilizations? Are you living 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago? No, you're not. You're living today. Are you under the spirit movement of the 1800s and 1900s? Are you under the early esoteric teaching systems of the Bailey material, the Blavatsky material, the communities, the Diane Fortune communities in England or in America or whatever that were founded in the early 1900s, 1910, 20, 30, 40, up until 1959? Are you part of these groups? Are you there? No, you're not. You are here today in the 21st century. We are today writing 2023. Who are you you today? What are you today? And what does it mean for us today in the concept of past lives, current lives, future lives? What are the ideas now? What are we today? And not getting inflated and conflated with concepts and ideas that belongs to other civilizations, other societal structures, other types of civilizations, other types of educational systems, other types of dominance and suppression systems, other types of cults, other types of religious belief systems, other types of gods, other types of existence, other types of bodies, other types of forms of existence. So that's where I want to end this podcast on karma, the first one. Thank you.